Hi, everyone. How many people from Hermosa Beach here today? Wow. We had to go through security to get here, didn't we, Barry Fink? We came from Santa Monica. You ever heard of Santa Monica? My name is Phil Keoghan. I host a show called The Amazing Race. I am a friend of the Adlers. I met David on a plane in 1997. I sat next to him. Turns out we were both born in May. Turns out we were both born in 1967. And it turns out that we were both heading to see our girlfriends, who lived in the same building on the same street in New York City. And very strange. And we've been friends ever since. David, thank you for asking me to do this today. This is a very important gathering. I've learned a lot more about the Love Your Brain organization since talking with Carol and David about this. And this is a chance today for all of us to get a deeper understanding of what it means to love your brain. Also, an opportunity, and I see there's a lot of young people here today, which is really good, and a skateboarder that arrived today without a helmet. We're going to change that mindset, hopefully. I saw you sneak in with your skateboard. I won't mention your name. I do know your name. But by the end of this event, we hope that you will think about protecting that beautiful brain of yours. It's unbelievable, but every 13 seconds here in the United States, someone suffers a traumatic brain injury. That's 2.5 million Americans every year. And as David pointed out before we started this event today, it's not just sports injuries that we're talking about. These are people who just slip or they have accidents as well. So there are some accidents that are just unpreventable, but what we want to really look at today is what can we do to prevent brain injuries where we can, and then also how we treat brain injuries. And what's so great about the Love Your Brain group or organization is that they bring people together who are suffering from some of the things that may surprise you. I've been very surprised to learn so much from Carol and David about this, and we're going to explore that today with a panel. I would like to introduce you to my friend now, Mr. David Adler. Mr. Adler, if you wouldn't mind coming up. I'm guessing it's 2 decades that we've known each other. You're looking at 100 years of life experience right here, ladies and gentlemen. We just celebrated our 50th this year. David, thank you for asking me to do this. And let's also ask Adam to come up, the co-founder and executive director of Love Your Brain, Adam Pearce.
Thank you all for being here. This is like blowing my mind to have you all here right now. So why are we here today? Because, can you pick that up? We're here for one reason, is this helmet. This helmet saved my life. If I wasn't wearing this helmet, I wouldn't be here, we wouldn't be here, this event would not be happening. So you kids Phil was talking about, these things work. I'm incredibly grateful that you're all here today to discuss the most important organ in your body, your brain. I used to take my brain for granted until 4.5 years ago when I was hit by a car while cycling. For some reason, the driver didn't see me. I didn't see the driver. It was just an accident. An accident changed my life. 24 broken bones, 2 lung punctures, and a brain bleed. Great doctors put me back together. Thank you, Beach City's Orthopedics, and I think Dr. Ron is here. You're a miracle worker. Physical therapists worked on making me stronger. Occupational therapists helped me with my memory issues, speech issues, and double vision. However, things were different for me that I didn't understand. I didn't feel the same. But I didn't want to share this with others because I always have to be okay. I knew my brain had been affected because the double vision and memory issues continued. But there were other issues I had never experienced as well. I had extreme exhaustion and emotional issues I had never experienced. The issues affected me at work. I'd get incredibly exhausted, but at work I could find a place to hide and take a quick nap. When I became frustrated, I could go hide somewhere and throw a couple shoes against a wall, get some frustrations out. At home, it was a lot harder. I wanted to shield Brian and Elise from the emotional roller coaster I was riding. I'm their dad, I'm their protector, I'm their provider. Trying to hide from others, your emotions takes a lot of energy. So much energy, you can't keep it hidden. Until, like a volcano, you explode. It happened to me a couple times. Around this point, Carol suggested, maybe insisted, that we go visit some more doctors. We found our way back to the neurologist. He reviewed the symptoms that we discussed, looked at the brain scan, and simply said, "You have a traumatic brain injury." I'm like, woohoo, we have a diagnosis. Carol dove into the TBI research, reading books, going to seminars, reviewing online information. She probably has enough hours now to be a neurologist herself. Oh, I'm still going. But wait, there's more. As she opened up with a few people about what we were experiencing, her friend Heather had just been to an event called the Do Event and watched the movie The Crash Reel and met Adam and Kevin Pearce. Carol reached out to Adam. Adam sent Carol a link to the movie The Crash Reel. What she watched it alone, concerned if I could handle watching the movie. Together, we eventually watched it. Not since Jaws have I ever been impacted by such a movie. Jaws kept me out of the ocean, the swimming pool, and my bathtub. I'm serious. But The Crash Reel made me feel part of a community. Seeing other people go through similar experiences and find strategies such as yoga and meditation to heal themselves motivated me to take more action with my own healing. I reached out to Adam in a few emails, and Adam and Kevin were both coming out to LA for a conference, and we finally met. We discussed how much the movie impacted me, and I wanted to figure out a way how to share this movie with our community and bring it to the South Bay. While trying to figure this out, how to have this event, LoveYourBrain developed an amazing educational curriculum that they are now piloting in 15 schools on the East Coast to teach kids about brain health and keeping your brain safe. Learning about this program motivated me even more to make this event happen. And then everything fell into place. In the last, I believe, after almost 2 years of trying to make this happen, in the last 3 months, the Hermosa Beach Theatre became available. Phil just finished shooting his 100th episode of Amazing Race. Ed Cunningham, we just learned about, ex-NFL football player and commentator who's interested in the issue, decided to join us. The Kings are in town, and Kyle and Nick agreed to support this event. We are a very active community. Skaters, cyclists, every team sport you can imagine, and some of the best skiing and snowboarding up in Mammoth. The money we are raising today through the sponsors, these amazing sponsors that were behind us, the amazing sponsors we have, and from the silent auction, which I hope you all participate in, will go to fund the education curriculum. The curriculum is going to be brought throughout the country, and I am very hopeful that we can bring it to the South Bay, because the South Bay really needs this curriculum. I want to thank you all again for being here. I'm excited to introduce my new friend, Adam, who's going to talk to you more about Love Your Brain.
Thanks, David. I sit up here and I'm watching Carol with just like a deep sense of emotion, because I could feel what she has gone through as a caregiver and have been in that place myself. And for many of you in here who have been caregivers to those who have suffered a concussion or a traumatic brain injury, have a perspective on the severity of this issue. I think that is valuable in not that it's the direct, I can't be the same, I don't have the same experience that Kevin has, and he can tell me that, but I think as a caregiver, I went through a lot of very emotional challenge through this time of Kevin's healing that has brought us to where we are today. So I feel very fortunate for Carol, who deserves a lot of recognition. And I think, David, you stand up here just making the challenge of TBI that much more challenging because it's so invisible. If you met David, you would have no idea that he's gone through all of this suffering. And the reality is that day to day there's challenges that no one sees, but he deals with. And I am just deeply grateful that he had the passion and commitment to get us here today, because clearly he has touched this community in Hermosa and is continuing to expand our mission on a much greater level. I thought today I'd actually start with a recent email we just got. And Phil started today kind of talking about the size of this issue. And I wanted to kind of bring it a little bit more down to the narrow of what we see day to day or week to week from people reaching out to us. And it starts with, it's from a mother so my 20-year-old son, Declan, suffered a tragic skateboarding accident 10 days ago. He's in critical condition, in an induced coma, and fighting for his life. And his mother, I am beyond distraught and looking for every tiny light I can find. Everyone tells me to be strong, but I don't know what that means anymore. He is my heart, my soul, and my spirit, and yet I sit helplessly, unable to help him when he needs it most. I am desperately seeking resources to help me be the mother that he deserves and needs more than ever. Any advice or information would be so very much appreciated. And when I say we get these emails day to day, week to week, I'm not exaggerating. The size of this issue is massive, and the lack of resources out there are very, very small. And it pains me because she emailed us 3 days ago saying that he didn't make it. And it's happening every 13 seconds. And it perplexes me how there isn't a connection that we all make to realizing how important our brain is to our health, our happiness, our well-being. And this message, Love Your Brain, didn't really come clearly to any of us until Kevin went through this experience, and we saw when you don't have a healthy, happy brain, what happens. So I'm really excited to be here today because generally we have these events and we talk about the post TBI. So we have programs that support creating community, creating resources for people that have had TBI. But today we're here to talk about how we can help prevent people, especially youth, from having TBIs. So the educational curriculum started a few years ago, and we designed the curriculum with the Tribeca Film Institute in New York. And both Kevin and I are very dyslexic, so school was never that fun for us. School was not our place that we really found that passion and thrived. So for Kevin, he found that outlet for snowboarding. And what we found is going into these schools when Kevin speaks to these kids is that teachers say, man, I've never seen kids so connected to a speaker. And we're saying, wow, then there's something there then. We need to take influential people who have had these injuries. We need to combine that with a different kind of learning. So using film, the crash reel, which we're going to get into in a few minutes, a shortened clip of it. And then we've developed and designed a way for teachers to allow students to understand different components of our brains, what a TBI is. We recently just did a study with 80 seniors at our local high school, and 25% of them had no idea what a TBI was. So if we can't change behavior, if we can't do these other things, at least what we can do is start to have a conversation that wakes people up to understanding that what is a TBI? What is the impact, right? It doesn't just affect David, it affects his wife, it affects his kids. This is a much bigger issue that I think what we're really doing here is starting the conversation. So I'm really excited to be in a community like Hermosa that's active, that wants to get out there and do sports, and I think what we can do as a community is figure out ways to make those ways safer and reduce those risks of sustaining these injuries. So as this says, the goal of the educational curriculum is to get kids these tools and these skills to understand what it means to act from a brain-first mentality. And when I say brain-first mentality, that's if I get on a bike, what does a brain-first mentality say? Oh, I should be wearing a helmet, right? That's like the easiest thing I can do. Like getting in a car, you put a seatbelt on. So the next slide is really just shows a little bit of the impact that we've had to date. We've reached 1,000 schools, students in schools. We've been into 17 schools. 22 teachers have led our curriculum. Over 500 students have gone through our study guide. And we've actually expanded the curriculum outside of schools into prisons. 80% of the prison population has some form of TBI. So it's across the board an issue, and we're finding ways that can relate to all of these different populations in an impactful way. So again, really thrilled to be here. Thank you all for your generosity in donating, because it's allowing us to take this curriculum, this message into schools throughout the country and make a greater impact. So next, we're going to show a shortened version of the crash reel and then invite an incredible panel up here to speak from a multiple of perspectives that I think you'll leave today feeling excited, empowered, and more educated in this world of TBI. So thank you.
For those of you who have not seen the crash reel, the film, thoroughly recommend it. David and Carol shared it with me after they found it. And as you can see, an unbelievable unbelievable documentation of just what you went through. And firstly, I think you deserve a round of applause for opening up your lives like that. The honesty at the table. Clearly, you have amazing parents. You can't help but fall in love with David. And your family, what an incredible family, supportive family. And I think, Adam, you brought up a really interesting point today, which was just the idea of the supportive family. So I do want to introduce you to our panel, because we're really honored to have a fantastic group. I might as well start right down the end here with Carol. Carol, who is David Adler's wife. She is a super mom. I know her to be a super mom, and if any of you have ever seen her on a bicycle, she has the best calf muscles in Southern California. They're unbelievable. They could win a contest. They are incredible. She's a teacher, a spin teacher, and has been unbelievably supportive to David and held the family together through 4.5 years of a really tough time. So we wanted to have Carol here because, as Adam alluded to before, it's one thing for somebody to have a brain injury. It's another thing for the people around that person. It's incredibly challenging and difficult. So thank you, Carol, for being here. We're also really lucky to have a couple of Kings players. We got some Kings fans here, LA Kings fans. Two imposing figures, forwards, high scorers, both wearing the beards today, you'll notice. Two, don't mess with them guys. David told me, don't mess with them. Phil, don't mess with them. And obviously playing in a contact sport and a professional sport, they have a lot to share, a lot of changes going on in professional sport right now. So thank you both for being here. We have Kyle Clifford with us and Nic Dowd. And some of you may recognize our next guest. He has been working in sports for a long, long time, former professional athlete in the NFL, going back to 1992, is that right, 93? Yeah, and also a sports analyst who just left ESPN recently, is one of your, he lives in your neighborhood here, and I am, of course, talking about Ed Cunningham. Thank you very much for being here, Ed. And the Pearces, you've seen them up on the big screen. Thank you both for being here. Kevin, David mentioned before that this helmet, this one right here, he told me he's taken all the blood off it, but he said that this helmet saved his life. And I was just wondering if you could just talk about, just to get right into it, helmets, the importance of protecting this computer that we have up here, and why it is so important to take preventative measures to protect that beautiful brain of ours.
In no way am I here to tell any one of you to stop
playing sports or to stop being outside or to stop doing that, but do it in a safe way. I was being safe. I did have a helmet on, but in a way I wasn't being safe, because what you don't see in the crash reel that nobody really knows is that a week and a half before that happened to me, I had a severe concussion. And that's why that crash ended how it did, is because my brain was already injured. After a concussion, you don't heal in a week and a half. And that's the hardest part, is because I felt fine and I felt like there was nothing wrong. I didn't have any symptoms. And so there was no reason for me to think that I couldn't be snowboarding. There were no doctors telling me that, like, stopping me from riding, and I felt fine. But I think as we learn more and we realize that when you get a concussion, you need to step out and you need to step back and you need to take a break. And so I hope that you can all learn that. Whether you're young or old, if you hit your head, you need to give yourself the time and go and meet with a doctor or go and ask somebody that knows about the brain when you can start playing that sport again, because a week and a half was not enough time.
Ed, maybe you could speak to this, because I grew up playing rugby in New Zealand. I can't remember how many times I got knocked out. And the first thing that would happen is somebody would run onto the field and get you to count to 5, and then they'd say, oh, you'll be fine, go back out and play again. Why has this become such a topic of conversation in recent years? Why is this such a hot topic right now?
It's unfortunately, it's death. We have a lot of my colleagues that played in the NFL are suffering from CTE, which is a protein in the brain. There's not a lot of science, and I'm sure Adam can speak to this, about what happens to the brain. And I think Kevin hits a good point. We don't know much about the brain. People can be concussed, and you may go 5 or 6 days before you show any symptoms. You may not have known. Even if you went in, they may not have been able to tell you. But I played with, anybody remember Junior Seau?
Yeah.
Right? We all with pride. He kicked my tail my first start in college here at the Coliseum. I went to the University of Washington, and Junior beat me up and down the field. I was his highlight reel when he was drafted. Literally, I was the guy he was beating when he was drafted. And like these guys can attest, that's the beauty of sports, right? Is I learned I could come back from that. I learned through sport, I'm sure your toughness helped you come back from that. But Junior's dead. And Junior's dead because we play a sport. Hockey is aggressive. It's contact. I've been on an NBA court. I'm sure you guys have seen how contact it is. There is no sport except for rugby and some other sports where I don't go to take the ball or the puck. I go to take the person to the ground. And it's a dynamic that, when I left ESPN and left a really good job, I was having a hard time as a color analyst.
Can I just ask you why you left your job?
Yeah, my job as the guy who's the color analyst for college football, these were kids to me as I got older and had kids, and I'm watching guys get carted off the field, and I'm having to sell the steak. Hey, here comes 3rd and 8. Let's go to the next play. And frankly, I felt like a fraud because I know how the sausage is made. And I will say, as you make choices, with the proliferation of the UFC and how big football can be in some communities, go down and watch those sports up close. If you go on the ice and you see these guys skate, it's beautiful and it's poetic. There's not much poetic about the game of football. They're huge men running into each other, and I couldn't abide that anymore. And I think we do have to start making choices, but there's guys who are taking their own lives because their brains were so repetitively damaged.
So, Kyle and Nick, the protocols that have changed, that are taking place in pro sport, is that something you're pleased to see happen right now?
Yeah, definitely. I think the league's starting to step in. I can speak only for hockey. I don't know how the NFL is doing it, but if anybody shows that they have any type of a brain injury on the ice now, there's spotters in the stands that are there to protect us, and they'll take us out of the game immediately. And we'll be put in a quiet room, and we'll be assessed by doctors, and it's determined by the doctors whether we can go out and play or whether we got to, take the night off. And the next day, if we're told to take the night off, we'll go in and see the doctors again, and they'll assess us and evaluate whether we we do have a brain injury or not, and then we go from there. If we do have a brain injury, we'll take as much time as we need to get back playing healthy, like Kevin said. It's the repeated head injuries that cause the long-term damage, and it's not to tell anybody to stop playing hockey or football or snowboard. It's just be aware and be safe. You can come back 100%. You just have to take the time you need.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is the stigma that surrounds, a brain injury in our sport especially has changed. I think that guys are much more willing to take the time to let themselves repair, as opposed to jumping right back into it. Because I think, all the sports that we played, snowboarding included, is something whereas, guys are looked upon as how tough is a guy that can get through an injury. And, it's one thing you got a broken arm. Well, yeah, it takes, X amount of time, you're healed, everything's sufficient. But brain injuries, like Ed said, we don't know a lot about them, and everyone functions differently. So I think, Kyle said with the stuff they have, the protocols they have with the spotters, and you have to go in and take all these tests, and then, you can be cleared or not cleared. That's great too. But I think the players are now looking at it as, well, this is my career, and I'm comfortable making the decision to help myself. So,
Adam, I've read that young brains, young kids, they have their skulls are thinner. They don't have the same insulation around all the wiring in the brain. How important is it to get to, like, there's a lot of young people sitting here today. How important is it to get to them to change this whole idea that what these guys were talking about? I mean, it was the same when I played rugby. It was sort of like, just brush it off, get out there and get out. How important is it to get to young people and say, hey, you know what? If you get hit, it's okay to sit out and get better.
Yeah, it's absolutely critical. I mean, I think what we're starting to see a shift in is more of a sports culture in supporting each other, instead of being, the tough guy or the tough teammate, but instead saying that this is about your long-term well-being. This isn't just about us winning a title. This is more than that. This is about having the ability to have a family, to support the people you love, and to do the things you love. Because what we saw is Kev can't do what he ultimately loved to do, and it's not worth it. So I think for especially young kids, 12, 14 years old, that's when our brains are developing. We have to make sure that the contact is at a much minimalized risk than it is when we get older.
Kevin, I read a quote from you, and you said, the brain is who we are. And then you also said that after the injury, you were different. And I was wondering, Carol, if you could speak to that as it relates to David. I remember getting that terrible call from you to let me know that David had been injured. And when I saw David, I saw him in pain. I saw him on the hospital bed. I felt sick to my stomach. But I was looking at him because of the way he looked like physically. What you've had to deal with is more of what's been going on with him in terms of who he is now after that injury. I'm just wondering if you could speak about what that is like when all of a sudden it's like there's another person in your house.
Can we just, before you jump in, can we just make it clear? I'm Kevin. I had a really bad traumatic brain injury, and this is David. And David had a really bad traumatic brain injury, and this is David's wife. So just so you guys are clear, there's a lot of different people. But Dave's the man, and his wife is amazing, and I'm so excited to hear.
Thank you, Kevin.
And Carol is not married to Kevin.
It's pretty cute.
Pretty cute, yeah. Watch out, David.
All right, back to David.
People are sick out here in California.
So sick.
All right. Well, first of all, every brain injury is different. And that's one of the things that is so incredibly challenging is when you have a broken bone, you get a cast and people know, oh, all right, you can't write for a while. When you have a broken brain, you have no idea what that's going to look like. And initially for David, it was double vision and some memory loss. And it's very easy to have compassion for someone with those issues. But then as things progressed, it was emotional issues. It was being so quick to anger over the slightest thing. It was being unable to be in social situations for very long because he would feel so overwhelmed. And I think he was the social chair for his fraternity in college, super outgoing guy, and to see him kind of shutting down is really hard as a wife and a partner. And it was, kind of a roller coaster, and things got worse instead of better because we were trying to hide it. And he was trying to protect all of us and to protect himself. And I think the biggest message I have is to take the stigma away. And when you are more open about your symptoms, whatever it is, we all have issues, whether it's TBI or something completely different. If you're open about it, people can help you. If you're trying to hide it, all you're doing is piling on more and more shame, which makes it more difficult to heal and causes more health problems. And so things finally started getting better for us when he was more open and I was more open, because people would say to me, "Oh my gosh, what an amazing recovery. I saw David skiing. He's back on the bike. This is incredible." Yeah. He was in the closet on the floor for 2 hours yesterday. But I didn't say any of that. I just said, yeah. And the body is amazing at recovery, and the brain is amazing at recovering too. And once we were more open about things and got more help and found psychologists to help, things get so much better because you're able to take the shame away from it, and you're able to just ask for what you need. And if you need to leave a situation, you're upfront about it, and it's no big deal. And that's helped tremendously. He's an amazing
You're incredibly
person,
strong,
and,
Carol, I know, and David has told me just how amazing you strong you are.
And obviously I can talk and talk and talk. So
No, you can, but
I'll let you guys go ahead.
but I think, I know that seeing the film Crash Reel really changed your lives. And again, just to you guys, amazing how you have opened up that world, like how you've put a focus on that. There is such a stigma to just shake it off. It's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. But you guys have kind of said, hey, you know what? It's all right to acknowledge it. And Adam, for you you basically put your life on hold, right, to look after Kevin. Was that an easy choice? Was that an automatic choice? Where did that come from, that choice?
Yeah, it was an easy one. I mean, I didn't even have to think about it, actually. It was just immediately saying, I need to, seeing him there, I need to see him in a different place. And until he gets to a place that, it feels good, then we're going to allow him to get there. And I think so much, too, what you're talking about, for me, it's seeing this from my perspective has gone from this is less about being cool and more about being smart. And there's such a cool factor in snowboarding, in so many sports. And I think we're at a time now, we're getting more educated in, does that cool factor actually make sense, right? I would rather be healthy and able to do the things that I want to do and not feel cool. And I think a lot of times when we're actually trying to be cool, we're not being ourselves. And I think if we get more into helping kids understand, giving them the self-confidence to feel good about who they are, they're going to less need to find that from other places. But I think it's a responsibility from companies, the magazines, of putting snowboarders on covers with helmets and not this cool factor where they're not. So I think it's a responsibility on kids and responsibility on
I was struck in the film. I've been around sports my whole life. I've been around the highest level. But I was struck by the film, and I give you, Kevin, a lot of credit for finally breaking through and saying, okay, I can't do this, and giving up the dream. I played in the NFL. You guys know that the work you put in, the thought of not doing it can be sort of overwhelming. And I think for parents, I don't know if maybe, whatever. I've come to this, and I saw it in this film. We have negative competition and we have positive competition. Negative competition is where you try to figure out your value or who you are. Positive competition is where you try to bring out your best self. And I think that's what you're just speaking to. We spend so much, I was watching, so I worked for ESPN for 17 years. The X Games does not exist, it's owned wholly by ESPN. I don't know if anybody realizes that. They invented the X Games. How hard did you push yourself to be a star for the X Games? I mean, that first trick you did on an ungroomed kind of frozen pipe, it was like a front flip. You were doing something that was over your skis, right? And so we all as a society, if you're a parent, and you guys know this, coaches who try to bring the best out in you want to play for them forever. The guys who are drilling you and you're no good and getting that you're using shame to coach instead of building you up, maybe you guys can speak to the culture change, because if you go and look, I don't care what sport it is, if someone's coaching your child with anger and direction and shame, get them out of there. I don't care if it's cycling. I don't care if it's, we as a society need to choose. Sports are meant to bring the best out in us, not, as Kevin, I'm sure you may be able to speak to this, you felt defined, I think, right? And that was hard to give up.
Yeah, well, that was me. That was everything of me. So it was everything. I was going to give it everything I had. And just to clear it up, that was only 24. We're talking a lot about the crash reel. That was 24 minutes of it. The movie's 137 minutes. So that was like a little tip of the iceberg. And that movie really gets into some intense stuff. So I'm going to tell you all to watch a movie about me. So like, right.
And it's available in the lobby for purchase.
It's worth it. Kevin, you said, another quote of yours was you said that you used to be defined by the tricks that you used to do. And now people define you differently. And you're good with that. You're good with the fact that people now think of you and think of somebody who speaks out against loving or speaks about protecting your brain. And you're good with that? You're good with that new mission in life, that new goal, that new legacy?
Well, yeah, it was kind of like I didn't really have a choice, but I have had a choice of what I'm going to do now. And I feel like what we're doing now is so much more powerful and so much more important than what I was doing. And just to speak quickly on the Love Your Brain Foundation, I never thought it was cool to love my brain. When the doctor first told me to love your brain, Kevin, I was like, that is so stupid. Like, love your brain. Like, God, it's like, and then it's turned into this. And it's like, I am so proud to be able to sit up here and say that I totally and completely love this brain. And what that means is that I'm going to do everything I can that's best for my brain. Every day, all day, we have these choices. We're so lucky, this group of people that we have, that we're able to make choices, that we have that luxury, that we get to choose what kind of food we get to eat. We get to choose if we're going to go for a run. We get to choose whether or not, and even more so on the weekends, we get to make choices. And there's a lot of good things you can do and a lot of bad things you can do, and they all come back to affecting your brain. Just about every single thing that you're going to do throughout your day is going to affect your brain negatively or positively. And I just ask you to just maybe take a moment and think before you make that decision of what you're going to do next. Just think about how is it going to be good for you or bad for you? And that's the essence of loving your brain. Is it good or is it bad? Is this going to help me or is this going to make me worse? And it's when it comes down to it, it's simple. It's really, really hard to do, but it's simple. It's kind of weird. Hard but simple.
Hard but simple. But I mean, things that they're doing now in professional sports. Nick, Kyle, can you just speak to whether you think the changes that are taking place in professional sport are going fast enough? Do you feel that there's more that they could do in professional sport? I mean, it sounds like in hockey you feel that they're making the right choices, but football, there's a lot of people that say that football, it's too slow. They need to make more radical changes and stop celebrating those big brain injury type hits. Thoughts on that?
I guess, like as you said, it's challenging for us to speak to that, but I think I don't know if they're moving slow enough or the sport is moving so fast. I mean, like we all turn on the games on Sunday and we want to watch basically enormous humans run into other enormous humans at a really fast rate, and it's getting faster and faster. Just like hockey, the game's getting faster and faster, more physical. I mean, you have guys that that bring that much speed to the table, and then they're that genetically that big of a person. I mean, I think it'd be a better question for Ed here. Is that I don't know if it's a game's moving slower, is it just you can't keep up. I mean, people want to see what they turn the TV on for. So.
Ed, what do you think? I mean, if you were in charge, if you were the big guy and you could wield a big iron fist and say, this is what we're going to do, what would you do?
I mean, I'm on record. I don't think the sport of football is safe to play in its current state. I mean, I know that's a harsh thing to say.
We've got big fans out there. Number one game.
You know, it's funny. I've worked through and I've got, there's some technology. Some of our techniques, I'll share with the audience, and David, you'll find this fascinating. In our sport, I'll use the microphone. The way you used to tackle someone was as they're running, and hockey guys, you should watch this. As this guy's running, you put your head in front of them, literally to stop them. And then Pete Carroll of the Seahawks put out a tape where they showed rugby tackling, which you did, where you put the head behind the runner. Right?
Well, it was self-preservation.
We had decades where we were taught, put your head in front of the runner. Now think of that. I mean, they're guys that are 230 pounds running faster than anyone in this building could run. So we have made some leaps. The problem is, and anybody who's played the sport sort of high-level high school or above, when you have people of that size and the construct of the game is it's not just tackle football, it's contact at every position. So at the line of scrimmage, which is where I played, there was, in a series of 10 plays, I probably engaged with my helmet 6 of those plays. I mean, fully engaged, meaning a headbutt. That's a problem. We used to brag. I love hearing the culture change, by the way, because when I played, we bragged about the scratches on our helmet. Well, that's our frontal lobe. In the 90s, that's what we bragged about. And it's nice to hear that the culture has changed, that you guys feel empowered enough to take the time and take a couple of games. Because, when I played in the NFL, it was 16 games, and I played on bum ankles and everything else, and it's nice to hear that the culture is changing.
Well, if you remember, for a long, long time, there was a big stigma around talking about mental illness, people suffering from depression. That's obviously changed with a few people that have come out openly speaking about that. And it feels like there's a change now with brain injury. I read this statistic that said that 25% of those people who suffer from traumatic brain injury have suicidal thoughts or actually attempt to commit suicide, and that statistic is staggering to me.
That's the brutal part of what happens, to my ex-teammates and guys I played against, is we played a very violent sort of hand-to-hand combat sport, and that's the way those guys go out, is they go out in violence. It's a really, I think, a karmic circle, frankly, of some of the choices that we made. And, you're a kid, and a lot of college football is sort of built on kids from poor neighborhoods. It's not a lot of sort of middle and upper class kids that are signing up to play at Alabama. And, those kids don't feel like they have other choices. And I think that's part of us as a society starting to work together to be smarter, to give other choices to some of these underprivileged kids, because unfortunately they don't feel like they have a choice, I think.
Adam, the future of Love Your Brain, where are you guys going to take this? You're clearly driven. You've got a great message. You mentioned that you've been into, 17 schools now? What's the future hold for Love Your Brain?
Well, I think there's two sides, as I mentioned earlier. I think in terms of where I think it can go in terms of the post-supportive side, I think by us having these conversations and creating a community where people feel accepted to speak to these issues, that's the direction I want. I want there to feel like every person who's had a brain injury has a support community out there who can speak to. If that's in the NHL, the NFL, anywhere I want there to be people that you feel comfortable and open to go and express those issues with. And I think on the prevention side, I want to see behavior change from kids coming in here on a skateboard wearing a helmet. And I think behavior change, if you look at it, is one of the hardest things to actually change.
And that's the hardest right there, is trying to get kids on a skateboard but keep talking about behavior.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be an evolution of. I think it starts with awareness. I'm constantly surprised at how many kids don't know what a TBI is, even that a concussion is a mild form of a traumatic brain injury. So I think if we start with this, with the awareness, and also I think having people like Ed, who had 20 plus years in the NFL, say, you know what, I'm taking a stand for this. I'm actually going to quit my career when I'm sure it supports his family and all the things that he enjoys doing, because he feels so committed and understands the repercussions of this.
And as Kevin said too, just seeing that imagery on the cover of magazines to shift the change and that stigma. I have a neighbor who has one of those motorized skateboards. Yesterday I saw him going up and down our driveway. He must have been doing 20 miles an hour. And I said, hey, listen, I've got a spare helmet. Do you want one? And he said, well, back in Texas, we ride motorbikes without helmets. I'm good. I was like, all right, well, I said, I mentioned that I was coming to this event. But look, he's a 55-year-old guy. He's fixed in his ways. But yeah, just what you were saying, Kevin, if people start to see people that they care about, role models like you guys, if they know that you guys are speaking to protecting your brain, loving your brain, if they know that you are embracing that as professional athletes, that's going to help the shift for kids, because kids are very, very aware of what their role models are saying and what they're doing and what they live by.
Yeah, and I think the main message too is what we've talked about, is that sports are critical for us. Like, they are so important in building community and leadership and all of these things, that for Kevin, like, that was, I think you've said it before, you wouldn't go back and change any of it. But because snowboarding was his outlet. School wasn't necessarily that, but sports was what gave him that passion, which we all want to find. We all want to find what gives us a sense of meaning. And sports creates that for so many people. So this is about just, I think, shifting this lens of understanding sports are critical for us as a society, but yeah, let's make them so that these careers go on and people can do them in a better way. It shouldn't seem like, that doesn't seem like a crazy idea to me. But
well, you're thinking about where we're going to be in the future, which I think is great, and it's going to take a generation, a shift.
That's because he's having a kid next month.
Is he really? Congratulations.
But it's cool. It's great to see all these young kids in here, because it's up to you guys to make these good decisions. Be the role models for the next kids to come behind you.
Well, even if you think of cycling, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that the idea of wearing a helmet in cycling was like, what do you need a helmet for? In the Tour de France, it wasn't compulsory, but all of that has changed.
And that's where it's at in skateboarding right now. I'd say of all sports, skateboarding's like the farthest off the spectrum. You go to a skate park and you'll be hardened to find one kid in a skateboard helmet, and that's
how does that make you feel?
To me, it's crazy going through it and living through it. It's like, you guys are nuts. Like, skateboarding is awesome. I'm in full support of skateboarding, but the fact that not a single one of them has a helmet on, and I'm sure there's some skateboarders in here, and you're just like,
well, we had a young kid roll up on that skateboard right there.
Just like, helmets are stupid in skateboarding, and that's how, it's not his fault.
No.
None of his friends wear them. Nobody that he looks up to wears them. So why is he going to wear them? It's all about the people that these kids look up to. And
well, we thank you guys for speaking out and being here as professional athletes, and you're obviously role models to young hockey players, and just the fact that you're prepared to come out today and to talk about it, it's huge.
It's huge.
It helped with the shift. So
this is like, we've done this a lot of times in a lot of events we've held, and this is like the most unbelievable one by far and away that I've ever been to, that these three guys are up here right now in front of you. So,
and let's not forget Supermom down here. Is there anything that any of you would like to add before we open up to some questions? Anything you'd like to say?
With his pending parenthood, I have two young boys. I live in Long Beach. It is hard to be a principled parent in today's society. It's really hard to choose what movies to watch, to know what friends they're hanging out with. There's so much that you sort of have to monitor. And I am appalled in my neighborhood. I live in a hilly neighborhood, and there's kids doing 20 miles an hour down hills, ripping on skateboards. And I have a 3- and a 5-year-old in the back saying, Dad, they're making bad choices. I have to work
That's
my
a smart
tail
kid
off.
right there.
And look, I saw my 3-year-old went down hard, and without a helmet, I think we were in the, I don't know if he had a TBI, but he would have been concussed for sure. And it was on his scooter. And so I just, like, give yourself a moment as a parent. You know, they talk about choice. It's just hard. But a helmet, like, if you have a couple things that are black and white, for me it is. And I think it's because I've come from a place where, you know, I mean, NFL wives on Facebook, there are a lot of horror stories out there about what's going on with some of these guys. And it is very, very much related. And I think it's hard to be a principled parent, but if you're going to put your foot down on one thing, this is a pretty good one.
And helmets work. I don't know about in football because I'm not as connected with that, but I know that on skateboards, on snowboards, on bicycles, when you're doing these sports, the helmets are the most important thing you can do is have your kid, or if you are a kid, put a helmet on. And it's like, if your buddy or your bro says you're not cool, be like, well,
you're making bad choices. Yeah. That's what you tell them.
You're right,
Got that from your 3-year-old. Yeah. And Carol, let's just end with the idea of support for those people who need the support because of an accident. If you knew then what you know now, what advice would you give to people who are looking after somebody with a TBI?
Get support for yourself. Find a friend or a counselor or someone, and research. And I typed up a list of websites that were really helpful to me, and they're on the bar in the lobby, and some other information there as well, because the most important thing is finding community, and this community is absolutely incredible. I could not have gotten through the early days of the accident without Hermosa Beach and everybody.
Anybody here from Hermosa Beach? No.
No, this place is amazing. People bring you food, flowers, I don't know, it's great. But in terms of brain injuries, don't be afraid to reach out to people. And my email address is on the handouts that I put on the bar in case anyone wants to just say, hey, what do you do about this? Or, you know, we all reach out to each other as parents. Hey, what do you do about this? It's the same thing with brain injury or anything else.
Awesome.
Oh, and one other thing I do want to say, though, too. Well, probably 10 other things I want to say.
Carol, there's no stopping you, please.
I got a mic.
Yeah.
Well, let me just show you. Do you mind? Can we use your hand for a second? We're going to do a model of the brain. Can everyone just hold your hand up like this, like this? All right. So this part represents your brain, your spinal column going up to your brain stem, and then the inside of your brain here, super important stuff, and then your thumb represents your limbic system, and that's the fight or flight response. So tuck that in and put the fingers over like that. So this right here is that prefrontal cortex, and that's what's decision-making and thinking through things and organizing information. And when your fight or flight response gets triggered, whether you're angry or whatever it is that triggers you, that's your thumb inside, it makes this flip, literally flipping your lid. And I think one of the most important things is for all of us to learn what triggers us, so that when you're at this point, not at this point, how are you going to react? What do you need to do when you sense yourself getting at this point? Whatever it is, do what you need to do, whether it's take a break, meditate, things that have helped us in just preventing getting to that point. Yoga, stand-up paddleboarding, exercise, any kind of sport is so good for your brain. You need aerobic activity to help your brain. But just that, if you can remember with your own hand the model of your brain, and when you start feeling yourself getting like this, do something so you don't flip your lid. That's
Great
all.
advice. Great advice. Well, we have some time to take some questions. If any of you have any questions, and we're open to young kids asking questions as well. Yes, way in the back there. You have to use your big voice.
This question's for Kevin. How were you able to gain insight to the fact that maybe you shouldn't
if you watch the movie, it took a while for me to get to that place because my brain was telling me that I was fine and that I could go back out and go out and do that. So as crazy as I look in this movie for thinking that I can go and do it and I can get back in the half pipe and do it, and the doctors are saying no, and Adam's saying no, and Mom's saying that I can't, and all these people are just telling me not to, I felt fine. So why am I supposed to believe them? When I was one of the best in the world at this, why should I not believe that I can go back and do that? And for me, it was one, seeing the other people that have had brain injuries and the kind of condition that they were in after they've had a second, a third, and where your brain ends up after you do this more than once, after you have more than one traumatic brain injury. I was not willing to go back to that place. And I think for me, the second was having the time to heal and really giving myself the ability to get better and having the patience and the time. It's been almost 8 years, and tomorrow at 6:15, I fly to Chicago to go back to see this eye doctor for the 9th time. Almost 8 years later, and I'm still working at it every single day. And I'm not going to give up until I have single vision. In that stuff that the doctor says, the eye surgeon here at UCLA saying that I'll never have single vision, it's like, it almost excites me that she says that. But like having people tell me never, it's like, you don't do that to me. Like, never is not okay.
You can tell, grit and determination. Yes, sir.
Watching the segment of the movie that we saw, one thing I thought about was I cannot even imagine how expensive that treatment that you went through following the accident was. And I also noticed Ed mentioned that a lot of people who are drawn to play college football tend to come from disadvantaged communities. I wanted to know what's been the effect of the Affordable Care Act on both preventative and treatment of traumatic brain injuries, and is funding research or focus on these activities a part of the advocacy of Love Your Brain?
It's not, and I don't have the answer for you. And if anyone else feels that they do have more education around that, please speak. Yeah, I don't know. I do know the healthcare costs are extremely high, and I know a lot of action sports athletes don't have health insurance. Kevin was fortunate to have health insurance that got him through, a lot of those $10,000 days in the ICU. So I think it's a really important one. I think there's been a lot of controversy around sponsors sponsoring athletes to compete but not providing health insurance, where their argument is health insurance companies won't actually give them an ability to give them insurance because they're acting in what health insurance thinks is too dangerous of a sport. So there needs to be a lot of work in it, and I think in short, I don't have all the answers there, but I know that the costs are extremely high, and there needs to be more attention in it.
I don't have an answer to the ACA question, but I do think it's important for people who are around college athletics, if you're sending a child to college, student athlete where they say your child is an amateur, that's so they don't have health care coverage after they leave college, because then it turns into workers' comp. And that's one of the biggest issues, and it came up, I was able to go to a panel in DC this past week. That's starting to come up a lot for college administrators, because the courts are starting to say that they're playing professional sports, and there's a lot of people that are worried about the healthcare costs beyond. I had a college teammate who blew his knee out. It was so bad. When he was 29 years old, he had to have his knee replaced. Well, he had to go to his own health insurance to have that done. Very expensive process. So if you're looking at college athletics and you're making that choice, just be wise about, hey, if they suffer a debilitating injury in college, that's on us. That's on our family once they leave college. That's a major issue in college sports right now, because the cat's out of the bag in football, right? Yeah. If you have to pay for people's health, like these guys have workers' comp, they're professionals. If they're injured, they have a system to fall back on. Student athletes don't. And to me, that's sort of a tragedy, I think, in the system, given the billions of dollars that are being pumped into it by major corporations that are exploiting the media rights. I mean, this is a very serious issue, I think. Again, societal, because we want to watch college football, we want to watch college basketball, but these kids do not have insurance once they're done.
Yeah, and I think on your website, Adam, it says something that the cost can amount to upwards of $3 million, right, for one of these injuries. So we're talking about something that's extremely expensive. Oh, yes.
I can speak a little bit to the ACA. I'm
Okay.
part of the Love Your Brain family, I suffered a brain injury while I was practicing. I'm an attorney, and I was practicing for a large firm in Los Angeles, and so I went on disability and then COBRA'd my own health insurance. But before the Affordable Care Act, you could COBRA for 18 months, but then you'd have to purchase your own health insurance. So in that 18 months of COBRAing is when the ACA came into effect and allowed me to purchase my own health insurance. And without that, I would have been completely uninsurable. After having put myself through school and law school and working as an attorney, I would have had absolutely no access to health care. So once you do have a concussion on your record or a TBI, that's a pre-existing condition. And if our government takes away the protections for pre-existing conditions, that affects everyone in future treatment that they will need. And this requires lifelong treatment for a lot of people. So that's a good question, and it makes a big, big difference, especially for this type of injury that has effects that continue throughout our lives.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leah.
Yes. Yeah, did you guys hear that question? The question was with regards to enforcing the use of helmets. So the police are watching people out skateboarding or riding their bikes and there's no enforcement. Wouldn't that be a solution to have the police say, hey, you're going to get a fine? Or
Yeah, I don't.
It's a mixed. It's a really hard one. I think starting from a place of getting people to make the decision themselves, to me, is a wiser decision. Again, though, we had to create a seatbelt law, and now people just wear seatbelts because it's part of the norm.
becomes part of it.
And it's a tricky one. I mean, none of us want to tell. Part of why Kevin and I love snowboarding is because there was a little bit of a rebellious side to it. But I think it's not worth that. It's just not worth that. So. Being in the position I've been, I am starting to lean towards they should be mandatory on a ski hill, especially in competition or going into parks. But at the same time, I would rather this young generation understand the real reason behind wearing a helmet to make that decision themselves. So it's a very controversial one, I think, but it's an important conversation to have.
It's done in sport, right? I mean,
but I think it's a good one for the hockey, right? Like hockey didn't wear helmets, and now they all wear helmets, and they're not cool because they wear helmets. Everyone's doing it.
Right.
You got to get everyone to do it. And the fact in skateboarding is that nobody does it. In snowboarding, it's rare that you go out there and see someone without a helmet on now.
So how did that happen? Because in the beginning, were people just wearing beanies and going out snowboarding?
Yeah,
and
totally.
So where did that shift take place?
I think it's people becoming smarter. And it's almost like, I'm not going to say any of you that skateboard aren't smart, because I skateboarded for a long time, and I like to think of myself as plenty smart. But it's not cool on a skateboard. In just about all the other sports, almost, it is cool to have helmets on, because you're stupid if you don't. And
I mean, it happened in cycling. I mean, there was a time where it was really uncool to be, wearing a helmet.
It's all about the cool
And now
factor.
it's really uncool. Like you go out on a ride and there's a guy without a helmet, the entire peloton would be like, dude, we don't
want to ride with you.
We don't want to ride with you.
Yeah.
Nick had
go get a helmet.
You have a point?
I was just gonna say, I think it takes time. I mean, I think the seatbelt thing is a good point. I mean, growing up, I don't ever remember wearing a seatbelt in the back of my car. Not because my parents didn't want me to, but because I got in there, I thought it was cool not to wear a seatbelt. I think in hockey, I grew up in an age where we always wore helmets, and it wasn't a big deal, and no one thinks anything of the latter. But I think, speaking to what these guys do, it's going to take time, and I think that the only way that we can accomplish what we want to do is by these types of things, and then spreading that information to as many people as possible. But like they say, it's the kids, and it's a behavior thing. It's not. You can't tell someone to wear a helmet and then they drive around the block and they take their helmet off and cruise with their buddies. So it's a behavior thing, and I think that's what's going to take it such a long time to change. But with what we're doing now, I mean, it's the only thing that we can do in order to change it. So,
yeah. Molly, how are we doing on time?
Young man, we got one last question from this young fella right here.
He asked if I remember what it was like after the crash, and I don't remember the next 29 days. So I have no memory of that day or any memory of being at the University of Utah. Actually, it was 36 days that I was in the critical care, and I don't remember that. The first memory I have is when they took me in this airplane from the University of Utah to the to Craig Hospital in Denver, Colorado. So a month of my life, I don't remember anything.
Good question.
But that's almost a good thing, I think, because I don't want to remember that. He remembers.
I got to remember every day.
All right, quick story for you. They were there, and there were family members with me 24 hours, and Adam had been on this long shift of where he was like by my side, and I had all the tubes in me, and I was unconscious. And then he was like, I think I need to go like sleep in the waiting room. I'm really tired. And he went into the waiting room, and there was a lady sleeping on the bed that he had been sleeping in, and he was too nice to wake her up, and he didn't go to sleep.
That's amazing.
No, he did. He went and like patted her, and he was like, that's my bed.
He did?
Yeah.
No, I didn't. But I will say, actually, we did an event.
I don't remember it.
We had an event, and she showed up and came and thanked me after she randomly came across the crash reel and remembered our interaction the next day. So it was pretty cool.
If anybody has any other questions, we're going to be meeting afterwards. But how about a round of applause for our panel? Thank you so much.